Now I want to introduce Bart Campolo. He received his BA in Religious Studies from Brown University. He founded Mission Year, which recruits young Christian adults to live and work in poor urban neighborhoods. During that time, he became a popular writer and speaker in evangelical Christian circles. In 2005, he returned to street-level ministry as the leader of the Walnut Hills Fellowship, which is a missional interfaith community in inner Cincinnati. Most recently, he worked with the Abraham Path Initiative and the Telios Group in educating American faith leaders about the causes and potential remedies for the modern Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Over the course of his ministry career, Bart gradually transitioned from Christianity to secular humanism, and he's currently serving as the very first humanist chaplain for USC. He's with us this evening to talk about secular community, so please join me in welcoming Bart Campolo.
I feel like Britney Spears at this moment. Is this working okay?
No.
Yeah, can I?
Is it turned on?
You want to use it? No, just throw this in. Oh, great. How are you?
Good.
I'm so glad to be with you. Oh, you want to switch on so they can hear? Is that better?
No.
Is that better? Now I feel like I have the voice of God. This seems really loud to me. Is this really loud to you? Can you bring me down? Because I might get loud. Yeah, there you go. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me come here. It's funny. I don't know if you picked up from the biography, but I spent the vast part of my life as an evangelical Christian platform speaker, kind of a preacher, if you will, which means that, you know, it's funny when I don't get it out much anymore. And so, you know, anytime I get invited to talk to more than 3 people, it reminds me of the good old days. I'm really glad to be with you. It was funny watching the presentation. First of all, I'm not just glad to be with you, I'm very proud of you. Like you're probably aware that there are people trying to get this whole secular community building thing going all over the country in all different ways. And I've visited a lot of them and studied a lot of them and talked to a lot of their leaders. And if you don't feel good about what you're doing here, if you don't think you're like really awesome, you're not paying attention. What you're doing here is really powerfully exciting. And the thing that's most exciting to me about it is that it was very clear that the pie chart was my favorite part of that presentation, because it's very clear to me that this is not a debate club or a lecture society, but rather that this is a genuine community and that relationships are being built here that are helping to sustain people, not only in their atheism, but in their lives. And that's a really, really powerful thing. Listening to you, though, I decided to dump the talk I was going to give you. And the reason is this, is that most places where I get invited to go right now, what they want me to do is talk about one of 2 things. One is they want me to talk about my exodus out of Christianity and how I ceased to be a Christian and became a secular humanist. And that's a great story, and I'd be glad to tell it to you. And afterwards in the question time, if you want to talk about that kind of stuff, I can. But I was watching, like, you're going to have Jerry DeWitt come here. He's going to tell you a story like that. A number of the speakers that you had, they're going to tell you stories like that. And so, and probably half of you have stories like that, don't you? So it's not going to, you know, when I tell you the story of my Christian orthodoxy dying the death of 1,000 cuts, and finally the day at which I realized like I couldn't call myself a Christian in any way, shape, or form anymore, and trying to figure out what comes next, a lot of you know that story, you've lived that story, or at least you're familiar with it. So again, I'd be glad to tell it to you sometime, and if you have questions afterwards, I'd be glad to talk to you about it. The second thing people ask me to come and talk about a lot of times is secular community building. And what the reason they invite me to do that is because I spent most of my time in Christianity as an inner city worker, as an inner city missionary, going into living and working among really poor communities and recruiting lots and lots of college students to come and work with me in the inner city. And what we did in those communities is I would take a handful of college students, 6 or 8 or 10 college students, and I would put them in a house in the middle of a ghetto neighborhood where they would live kind of communally. So that was one level of community building, having a group of people live and work together for a year. And then they would go out into the community and build relationships with friends and neighbors in that neighborhood and try to bring them together in some kind of way. And for the last 10 years, I was building that kind of community in Cincinnati myself. And so a lot of times, because secular people are really good at debating, we're really awesome at arguing, but we haven't been very successful at building communities historically over the years. So a lot of times people say, hey, from your background, from your bag as a community builder, will you come in and sort of tell us some stuff about that? And again, like, I'd love to talk to you about that. But the truth of the matter is it feels like you've answered a lot of those questions that other people are wrestling with, and you've figured out some stuff about how to build community. There's one thing, we were talking about this earlier before the session started. There's one thing that we haven't yet figured out what to do with. Those of us, especially those of us that come out of the evangelical Christian world or come out of some religious bag, is because when you're a part of a Christian community, the community doesn't just exist to support each other. The community always has an external mission. We're going to go out there and save souls. We're going to go out there and win people to Jesus. We're going to go out there and make the world different. So there's a sense in which these communities exist for an external reason outside of themselves. And a lot of times when secular people get together, they're traumatized by that. They're like in recovery from that. They're like anything but that. And so when they get together, they don't want to have anything to do with anything that would look like proselytizing. They don't want to have anything to do with anything that would look like outreach. Their attitude is, let's put up a sign that says what we're about, and anyone that wants to come can come, and everyone else can go to hell. Well, they would go to hell if we believed in hell, but they can go, to Oakland. That was the joke. Yeah, I used to work in Oakland. It's a tough town. This reminds me of Philadelphia, which is where I grew up. But the truth of the matter, the truth of the matter is that then there's another set of people within the secular movement who have figured out that secular humanism, if you will, or atheism, or whatever your title is, for some people it's just a way of thinking. But for some people, it becomes a way of life. It's a way of approaching relationships. It's a way of approaching service. It's a way of approaching death. It's a way of handling the stuff in life that people traditionally handle in religion. And especially when people come together in communities, they go, one of the reasons we come together in communities is because we miss that. Other groups of people have these communities, and they can go from town to town, and they can always find people that are like-minded with them. And secular people say, man, we want that too. And so we form communities like this one. And when that way of life works for us, there's this itch that we have that goes, I got this friend at work. There's this person in my family, and either they're still in some religious bag and it's messing with them, or they're messing with me, or they're not in any bag at all. And I sure do wish they had friends like mine. I sure do wish they got to go to late night Sunday bowling. And the question becomes, the last line on the presentation, we don't create atheists, we create a home for them. And some people go like, if atheism is a way of thinking, we don't create atheists. We're not out there to fight with people. But if atheism is a way of life, if secular humanism is a way of life, if a community that cares about each other and is trying to make a difference in the world, if that's a way of life, don't we want to invite people into that? And so there's that tension. Some of you probably go, it ain't a tension for me. I know right where I am on that one. But it's a tension in the community as a whole. And so I'm the chaplain at USC. I'm the secular chaplain at USC, have been for just 4 months. Got there in September, fresh out of Cincinnati. It's kind of interesting being there because the way I got the job was I was coming to Los Angeles because my kids live there, and I was trying to figure out, like, if you were going to try to do some secular community building there, where would you start? And my friend at Harvard is the chaplain at Harvard, Greg Epstein. Some of you have probably connected with him. Jonathan Figdor, who I know you know, used to work with Greg. So Greg said, you know, the dean at USC is a really cool guy. He's a secular Hindu. He's the only Hindu dean in the entire United States. He said, he might have some ideas for you. So I called him up. The guy's name is Varun Soni. He's one of the neatest guys you'll ever meet. And I started to talk to him about how I had come out of Christianity. And ever since I had been out of Christianity, I'd been talking to people because I still had the same values. I still wanted to fight for social justice. I still wanted to reach out to kids on the corner who weren't doing anything good with their lives and invite them into a community where we were going to change the world together. I still wanted to kind of like bring people together so that they weren't alone in the world. And the more I talked, I said, you know, my theology has changed or it vanished. My worldview has changed, but my values are just the same, which of course was radically surprising to me because when I was a Christian, they told me if I ever stopped believing in God, I would immediately want to rape and kill everyone I could find. The more I started talking to people outside in the world, I met lots of Christians like that, people like Brian, you know, who had come out of Christian communities, and they were horrified by the stuff they used to think and believe in some cases, but they missed the community. They missed the covered suppers. They missed the bowling. And when I would talk to those people, I'd say, Bart, you used to build communities like that. That's what you did in the inner city. That's what you did with young people. He said, maybe you should start a church for people who don't believe in God. And I started kicking that idea around with a few people, and that's when I started checking out with these communities. And as I was talking to Varun about this, you know, I said, I think that's, I mean, it's a terrible word, church or whatever. It has all sorts of connotations for secular people. But I got to tell you, I want to create a community where there's singing and where there's eating and where there's service and where there's young people and children and where everybody's running around and all this. I want it to be like that. And he said, you know what? You should come to USC. He said, because we have 90 different ministries on this campus. There are 90 different ministries on the campus. We've got every kind of Christian. We've got Hindus, Muslims, Baha'i, Buddhists, Wiccans, you name it. We've got every kind of supernaturals on the campus. And he said, there's not one person here looking out for the spiritual lives of all the students who don't believe in God, and that's half the campus. He said, so you should come here and be our chaplain. He said, I can give you an office. I can give you business cards. I can even give you a USC email address. I just can't pay you. And so I bundled up my life savings, and I set myself up at USC as the humanist chaplain at USC. And, you know, at this stage in the game, you know, we're reaching out to students and people in the community, and we're building this group, and the community's going really well. And whether or not it lasts and whether or not I last there is going to depend in many cases, in every case, on whether or not I can convince people in the Los Angeles area that it's valuable to care for secular students and to look out for the spiritual lives of secular students on the campus of USC. But when we started pulling that community together, one of the things that became really evident right away is that we weren't going to be able, like, the secular student group, they had a little secular student group on the campus. And that was all the kind of the hardcore atheists who were, you know, carrying around their Richard Dawkins and, you know, yelling at anybody who wore a cross. But it became very clear that the vast majority of the kids of the secular kids on the campus weren't interested in arguing with supernaturalists about those kinds of issues. What they were interested in is, they were saying, is there a place? I know I don't believe in God. That's old news. They said, the question is, I want to be a good person. can you help me be a better person? I want to do good in the world. Can you help me do good in the world? I want to be with other people that share my values. Can you tell me where they are? And that kind of became the organizing principle. I won't tell you all the programming we're doing. That stuff would be boring to you. But I will tell you one thing that we do that's fun. On Sunday nights, my wife and I cook a huge dinner. And we go down to the campus, and we have this huge dinner, and there's a dining hall that we're allowed to use, because I am officially the humanist chaplain at USA. And we set up dinner, and the students come, and people from greater Los Angeles come that are interested in it. It's not open. It's not like your meetings. We don't advertise it and put posters up anywhere. You've got to have an invitation. It's easy to get an invitation. If you tell me you wanted to come, I'll invite you. It's that easy. But we need to know, you need to RSVP, you need to know who's coming, because it isn't like a soup kitchen. It's a dinner party. And we're going to set only as many places as the people we know are coming, and we're going to cook that much food. And everybody comes, and we all eat dinner together. And as we eat dinner together, there are questions on the table. Like, you know, those kind of like starter friendship questions that people, you know, have you ever played one of those like get to know you kind of games? Like, you know, like if you were a superhero, what superpower would you most want to have? Or, you know, if you were on a desert island and you could only bring 3 books, what would they be? You know, stuff like that. And people just start talking. And the whole thing is organized. There are a bunch of students in the group that are plants. And what I mean by plants is they've been told, like, you're not allowed to talk to any of your friends. Your job is to look for the new people that come in and ingratiate yourself to them and pull them in and make them feel welcome and warm in that situation. And so we have this dinner party where everybody's trying to form friendship. And when I get up at the end of it, when I get up before dessert, what I say to them is like, hey, in case you missed the memo, this is an intentional effort to build a circle of friends for people. And so, like, if you think that we're trying to get to know you and become your friend and we want you to end up loving us, you're right. We're building a circle of friendship here. And it's not based on any religious dogma at all. It's just based on the idea that loving people makes good sense. And it's amazing to me that the students that are coming to these dinner parties, some of them are our old secular crowd, but the vast majority of them are students that have never identified as atheist or agnostic or humanist at all. They never identified as Christians either. They don't believe in God. But one of them came to me the other day and he said, I never wanted to join any group that was going to talk about atheism because that's a conversation I don't need to have. I'm already convinced. He said, what I've been looking for ever since I got to this campus is a group of people who not only thought like I did, but who wanted to work together to make the world a better place. And I found that here. At the end of every one of those dinners, I give a talk. The talk is, I guess it's like a sermon, if you would. You know, I guess, you know what, I'm not even going to tell you what the talk is like. I brought one with me. It only takes a few minutes because you can't talk to them for very long. So I'm going to give you the talk. It's the best I can do for you tonight because and rather than telling you what I'm doing there, I want to show you the kind of talk that works for people who aren't in this room. You already know how to deal with the people in this room. You're awesome with the people in this room, and people like the people in this room, and do not, like I said, that's an awesome thing. I'm just telling you there's a bunch of people that are not in this room, and you got to figure out a way to talk to them, and this is a way of talking that's really worked for me. So we'll consider it a workshop in secular communication, okay? What are you going to do? I got the mic. You going to stop me? All right. So this thing, it was a perfect lead-in today that we did this thing in a restaurant, and that some of you brought your food in here. I was watching people eat, and I realized that what I wanted to start out by saying to you, the first thing I want to say to you tonight is, I hope you enjoyed your dinner. Whether you ate it here or you ate it somewhere else, I hope you enjoyed your meal. I really did. And it's kind of a question. Did you enjoy your meal? Did you enjoy your dinner tonight? That's the question. And when I ask that question, I'm not asking, did you enjoy the company that you were with? Like you're with all your friends. You're like, yeah, we were laughing. It was great. No, I'm not asking. And I'm not asking if you enjoyed, like you were hungry and now you're full and you're glad you're not hungry anymore. I mean, that's a good thing. Don't get me wrong. But here's what I'm asking about the last meal you ate before this talk. Did you enjoy the taste of the food? Did you enjoy the texture as it rolled around in your tongue? I mean, did you really taste the food? Or were you so busy shoveling it in and talking that you didn't notice? Did you enjoy it? Was there something in that food that was just, did you stop for a moment and say, man, I am lucky to be alive and eating this food at this moment, man? Maybe you didn't, and that's okay. But if you did, good for you. Good for you. And when I say good for you, I mean that I'm not being flip. I mean good for you. See, like I'm a humanist, and so for me, my definition of goodness is anything that contributes to the happiness of sentient beings, right? Anything that makes conscious beings happier is good to me. And so anything that you do that promotes kind of deep, lasting enjoyment of the wonders of life, I'll say that's good, okay? And really, when it comes to any given meal you might eat in your life, I mean, there's wonder in every bite, if you really think about it, isn't there? I mean, just think about a bite of food. Think about a bite of the dinner you had tonight. I mean, just think about, like, the growing of the food itself. I mean, just like if you ate a potato or a lettuce or something like that, just think about, like, the amazing wonder of just a seed getting planted in the ground and germinating and growing. I mean, and then breaking through the surface, and then you go like, how does it keep going? Where does it get the energy to grow? And you go like, photosynthesis. And I mean, maybe it's been a long time since you were in high school biology, but photosynthesis, I didn't even understand it then, but it's an amazing thing, isn't it? Sunlight transformed into growth. And that's before, and of course the thing won't grow unless there's water. And just think about like the wonder of water being evaporated and then up into the clouds and then like blowing over and then precipitating down. I mean, water itself is just an amazing thing. The process of delivering water. So you got this plant growing. And then after it grows, it gets harvested. I mean, we don't even stop with the growth. Then it gets harvested and like people come and think about all the communication, all the coordination that has to happen for a bunch of people to go out into a field and harvest it. And then the machines that they're using, the tractors. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys are mechanics. Do any of you know how to fix things, cars? Anybody? You know a little bit. I mean, just the wonder of the internal combustion engine. I mean, the fact that the things work. I mean, for most of us, I mean, like we know how to turn it on and make it go, but the fact that it works, and then before you get, then you'd have to go back to the gasoline in it, and the incredible process by which plant matter gets turned into fossil fuel and then gets refined into gasoline. I mean, it's just incredible. The machines that harvest it and the people that do it, the organization, the infrastructure, and then after it's harvested, it gets transported over roads and highways, which if you've ever blacktopped your own, has anyone ever blacktopped your own driveway? Right? It's like takes you like 2 days, and then just think about the infrastructure of like one road. How many man hours, how many woman hours of work go into that, and the bridges and all that stuff. It's just, it boggles the mind. And then it gets to the kitchen. And the skill and the knowledge that it takes to prepare food. Just to know how to cook it and where to put it and how to put those things together. And you know, and of course, if you were like me, if there are any Italians here, you know that it's not just knowledge and skill that goes into cooking. It's love. My grandmother always used to say, you can tell a meal that's been made with love. And I know that that's not scientifically verifiable. But the fact of the matter is if you've ever had a meal cooked for you by somebody who really was passionate about cooking, you know the difference. So then it gets on the table in front of you tonight. And you had eyes that saw it. You could see the food, most of you. You know, in order to cut it, in order to take your fork down there, you had to see it. And the eyes that you saw it with, right? They are wonders. 10 million years of evolution. That you can see. That you can see something, that the photons hit your eyes and you can interpret that into data. And then you took the fork and you went down there with your hand and you cut it. And you look at your hand. I mean, the hand itself is just a wonder. Like, I don't know. Do you really think about moving your hand? I don't know how I move my hand. I don't consciously know the signals that I'm sending that go back and forth, but it moves. It's a wonder. You bring it to your mouth, and you could taste it, and you could smell it. Again, through senses evolved over so many generations, so many things, that it's a mind blower just to think about it. And all that data and all that electrical impulses go to your brain, and oh my God, if there was one, what a wonder is your brain. To be able to take all that sensory data and collate it and interpret it and appreciate it. I guess what I'm saying is, when you think about all that stuff, and that was just one bite. My cousin, when I was a kid growing up, I had an older cousin, and he was a different kind of wonder, my cousin Ray. My cousin Ray was about 10 years older than me, and from the time I was a little kid, he was the cousin you just idolized. You know, he was like this. You know, you talk about like being alive, your senses being alive. You talk about appreciating your food. Ray appreciated everything. I mean, he did, you know, have you ever met somebody who just does everything in a big way? Like when they laugh, they're like, you know, and when you say like, hey, let's play touch football, and they show up with cleats. And you know, and when you say like, hey, want to do a book club? And they're like, sure, let's start with Infinite Jest. It's a real burner, you know, and like it's 8,000 pages long and nobody can understand it. Like Ray was just whatever he did big. And I was that little cousin, and for some reason he just decided to take me along to stuff. He was a youth leader. He worked with kids. And so whenever he was taking the kids to the beach, he would take me along. Whenever he was taking the kids to the movies, he would take me along. And I just loved being with him. He just made me feel so special. I don't know if you've ever had somebody in your life like that, somebody who you could just count on to make you feel special. If you haven't, I hope you get one here, because it's a really good thing to be with somebody like that. I just love this guy. I was in his wedding when he got married. I was the youngest groomsman, and I just remember, you know, putting on the tuxedo and just being so proud, like that I was in his wedding, because there were a lot of people that wanted to be in his wedding. He was the most popular guy at his college. He had a kid, went on, he did a lot of good stuff. He became a Baptist minister, and he was a good Baptist minister. Till he was about 35 years old. When he was 35 years old, I got a call from my dad that said Ray had had a stroke. Out of nowhere, he had this stroke, and he was in the hospital, and I needed to get over there. So I got in the car, and I drove over to the hospital. And when I got there, I didn't know what to expect, but when I went into the room, my aunt was there, Ray's mom, and my dad was there, and Ray was there, hooked up to all these machines. And they told me that he was brain dead. Like they had him on the machines, but he was brain dead. And they were trying to talk to his mom about what to do, because he had good organs. You know, he was a young guy, and he was in reasonable shape. And they needed his organs. They wanted his organs. And it made sense for him to give his organs, but they couldn't do it until she turned off the machine. And this was a seriously religious woman. And my dad's a serious Baptist minister. And there they were, trying to figure out what to do. Eventually, my dad had to go, and so it was just me and my aunt. I don't know if you've ever been in the room with somebody who's dying, if you've ever been the bedside person. I spent most of my life working in inner city neighborhoods, so I've been that guy quite a bit. But this was the first time for me. And I remember sitting there looking at Ray. And I just loved this guy so much. And as I'm looking at him lying there in that bed, I desperately wanted to believe that he was going to wake up, that he was going to be okay. And that I knew, medically speaking, it wasn't going to happen, but I wanted it so bad. And I remember thinking, even if he wasn't going to wake up here, I just desperately wanted to believe that he would wake up somewhere and he would get to eat another meal and enjoy some more wonder, because he loved eating and he loved wonder. I just so badly wanted that to be true. And you say, well, that's because you were religious. It's because I love my cousin. You don't have to be religious to hope for heaven. All you have to do is sit at the bedside of somebody who's dying that you love very much, and you just desperately want to believe you'll get to see them again. You get to talk to them again. Something will happen. You say, what are you talking about? That rationally, that makes no sense. Of course it makes no sense rationally. I'm not saying it's rational. I'm not saying it's true. It's not rational to believe that there is a heaven, but it's sure as hell rational to wish there was. And if you don't understand the religious motivations of people, if you don't understand why people so desperately want to believe in a God that fixes everything in the end, or why they so desperately want to believe that when their loved one dies, that they'll go to heaven and that they'll live happily ever after, if you don't understand that, then you're not paying attention. Then your scientific and analytical skills are really weak, because there are very good rational reasons for that desire. It's natural. Robert Ingersoll is my kind of hero in this humanist movement. And Robert Ingersoll was, in the late 19th century, he was the most widely, heard orator in all of America. As a matter of fact, at the time of Ingersoll's death, no single person in all of human history had ever been listened to by more live audience members than Ingersoll. And he put it this way. Ingersoll said, the idea of immortality, that like a sea has ebbed and flowed in the human heart with its countless waves of hope and fear, was not born of any creed, nor of any religion. It was born of human affection. And it will continue to ebb and flow beneath the mists and clouds of doubt and darkness, for as long as love kisses the lips of death. The idea of immortality is the rainbow, hope, shining on the tears of grief. See, what Ingersoll was saying was, it isn't the religion that invented the idea of eternal life. It was the desire for eternal life that invented religion. That's why people came up with it in the first place. They were trying to make sense of death, especially the death of the ones that they love, because frankly, you don't trouble a lot over the death of people you can't stand. My experience in the secular community is this, that most secular humanists I know have just enough reason to make them miserable. They're reasonable people. They can tell you exactly why it makes no sense to believe in a supernatural God. They can tell you exactly why this life is the only one they have. They can tell you all the good reasons why they don't believe in eternal life. But they can't tell you what to do about it. Ingersoll, he didn't stop there. Ingersoll went on, and this was the second thing he said. And yet he said, there's one thing of which I am certain, and that is that if we could live forever here, we would care nothing for one another. The fact that we must die, the fact that the feast must end, brings our souls together and treads the weeds out from the paths between our hearts. See, Ingersoll said, Yeah, of course, when somebody we love goes, we wish that there was something else. We wish we'd see them again. But he said, the fact is that if we all live forever, no moment would have any value. Time wouldn't be precious at all. Ingersoll speculated widely that if there was eternal life, there would be no love at all in the universe. That love was the child of death. And that the fact that we are going to die, that we're all going to die, is what makes it so imperative that we connect with each other. It's what we all have in common. Not that we have in common with all the people that lived and died millions of years ago. It's what we have in common with each other, because we're in this moment right now. Everyone in this room, we're in this moment right now. We're together, but it's not going to last. And we rationalists know that. The question is, do we know what to do with it? A friend of mine in the ghetto, back where I used to work, one day she told me about walking home. She was walking home from the bus stop, and there was a drive-by shooting in the neighborhood. A bunch of guys rolled out of a car, and they were shooting up the neighborhood, and people were running everywhere. And this kid she knew, this 16-year-old kid, she didn't really know him. She just knew, she'd seen him on the street, but this kid caught a bullet. And he fell in the street, and he was laying there, dying. And she didn't know him. So she waited until somebody else would go to him. I mean, they called 911, and they're waiting for the ambulance, but the kid's bleeding out there right on the street, and he's crying, and he's screaming. He said, I'm dying, I'm dying. And she said nobody would go to him. Nobody knew what to do. And so I said, what'd you do? And she said, I went to him. And I picked him up, and I held him. I said, what did you say? I mean, what do you say to a 16-year-old kid who's bleeding out on the street? What do you say? It's going to be all right? It's not going to be all right. I said, what do you say? And she said, I held him, and I hugged him, and I said to him, I'm here with you. She said it over and over again. She said, I'm here with you. I'm here with you, and I love you. I love you. I said, how could you say that you loved him? You don't even know him. She said, Bart, you don't understand. As I held him there and looked at him, I did love him. He's a kid. He's a person. He's a human being, and he's dying. And I know, she said, I felt I was desperate for him. And she said, I'm here, and I care, and I love you. I thought about that. I think about that a lot. You say, what am I doing at USC? They're not all bleeding out there, you know, but they're all going to die. And so are we. So what do you do? What do you do when you're holding somebody in your arms who's going to die? You know what you do? You put your arms around them, and you say, I'm here, and I care, and I love you. Death clears it all away. In the cognizance of death, you forget all the different, I'm here, and I care, and I love you. At USC, we're building this community. And what I'm trying to teach the kids is that on the campus, there are all sorts of young people that feel alone. There are all sorts of young people whose parents are dying of cancer, or who were sexually assaulted at a frat party last month, or who just don't fit in as well as they'd like to, or who know they're going to die. And I said, our job is to form a community of people that care about each other, that know each other, that are really good friends with each other, that are comfortable with each other, so comfortable that we can go to one of those kids and say, listen, if you don't have any other friends, you should come hang with my friends. You should come to our group. And they say, oh, I can't go to your group. I don't believe in God. And goes, neither do any of the rest of us. We don't believe in God, but we really believe in loving each other. We really believe in loving each other because it's rational. See, remember when I said most humanists have just enough reason to make themselves miserable? If they were really reasonable, they would know that if there is no life after death, then this is all we've got. And if this is all we've got, then there's only one thing that makes any sense, and that is to enjoy it as much as possible. If this life is all you have, the only thing that makes sense is to enjoy it as much as you can, is to be as happy as possible. And then they would ask the scientific, rational question, what makes people happy? So, well, making money makes people happy. You know what? I've actually got the data on that one. And to a certain point, money will make you happier. But then at a certain point, it levels out. And after a while, if you make more money, guess what? Typically, statistically speaking, people tend to experience lesser level of happiness. Making the most money isn't the most richest people aren't the happiest people. You live in the Silicon Valley. Who am I telling? You say, well, yeah, then you should just have sex. Sex is awesome. You should have as much sex as a matter of fact, if a little sex is good, you should have a lot of sex with as many possible people as you can. Oddly enough, the statistics on that one are not promising either. As a matter of fact, the more promiscuous people become, the more people they have sex with, especially the more sex that they have with people that they're not particularly connected with, a lot of times what happens is that they register some significant unhappiness. You say, drugs. Drugs! I love drugs. Has anyone here ever used drugs? Wasn't it great? Okay, you've used the wrong drugs. Statistically speaking, guess what? Odd thing. People that use the most drugs do not register the highest levels of happiness. As a matter of fact, you get into massive drug use and you register all kinds of pathologies. You know who does register consistently the highest level of happiness? The people that have the most significant loving relationships and the people that feel that they're using their lives to make the world better for other people. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not telling you should do this because God tells you should do this. I'm not telling you should do this because some religious dogma. I'm just telling you, I'm just a scientific dude, and I'm just saying, look, if this life is the only thing you have, you should make the most of it, and the way to make the most of it is to love people and fight for justice. Ingersoll said it better than me. Ingersoll said, the only goodness in life is to be happy. The time to be happy is now. And the way to be happy is to make other people happy. And so we're building a group, I tell them at USC, that's committed to making people happy. I know I'm out of time. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to say one last thing before I go. And that's this. I really hope you enjoyed your dinner. I really hope I enjoyed your dinner, your last meal. But more than that, I really hope you enjoy your next meal. You have this moment. You have this life. You're rational people. Make the most of it. Make the most of it. Thanks for having me.
Excellent.